Have you ever thought about how, like, ancient biblical prophecies could be connected to things happening today?
It's a bit of a head scratcher, isn't it?
It really is, but you send over some really interesting sources that explore exactly that. So, ready to deep dive.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of times those ancient texts, they can feel like a world away. Like, how could they possibly relate to, our lives now?
Exactly. But, one of the sources actually pointed out a statistic that really surprised me. It said over 70% of people believe that at least some biblical prophecies are actually happening right now.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. It kind of shows you that people are looking for answers. I mean, think about it. The world can feel pretty chaotic sometimes, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think people, they naturally search for patterns, for ways to understand what's going on. And, maybe prophecies offer that, like a way to see events through a spiritual lens.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So before we get into specific prophecies, can we take a step back? Could you maybe just give us a quick overview of the different types of biblical prophecies?
Yeah.
Because the source actually mentioned a couple of different types, like messianic and apocalyptic.
Right, right. So messianic prophecies, those are all about, as you might guess, the coming of a Messiah, a savior figure.
Yeah.
So they often focus on things like hope and redemption, the idea of a divine kingdom being established.
Okay, so that's messianic, and then what about apocalyptic, did you say?
Right, apocalyptic. Now those, they tend to be a bit more, shall we say, dramatic. They're all about huge events, like major upheaval, judgment, the whole world changing as we know it.
Whoa, okay, so those are two pretty different categories, and I'm guessing within those categories there are like tons of specific prophecies, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There are so many. For example, in the book of Daniel, there's a prophecy about a whole line of kingdoms. They're represented by these, like, different beasts. Yeah, beasts. And some scholars, they think that this prophecy, it actually foreshadows the rise and fall of different empires throughout history,
Interesting.
leading up to this final global power.
Huh. So that almost sounds like a prediction of like globalization, this
Right.
super interconnected world we live in today.
Yeah, it's definitely a possible interpretation, right? Like
Yeah.
the idea of a single, really dominant power, it definitely aligns with a lot of the anxieties people have about, economics and politics becoming more and more concentrated.
Right, right. But I mean, isn't it a bit of a stretch to say that those ancient prophecies literally predicted like modern day globalization? I mean, couldn't they be talking about something totally different?
Well, that's the thing about interpreting prophecies, isn't it? It's rarely super clear cut. There's always room for debate, different perspectives. But I think what's really interesting is how these ancient texts, they can actually get us thinking about current events in a totally new way.
Yeah, that's true. So, okay, there was another prophecy that the source highlighted that really caught my attention. It talks about knowledge spreading like wildfire
Oh, yeah.
at a time when secrets will be revealed. And I mean, come on, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see the connection to the internet age.
Right. That's a perfect example of how a prophecy written ages ago can suddenly feel so incredibly relevant to our lives.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing.
I mean, the imagery of like instant communication, everyone having access to information, it fits so well with how we experience the internet today.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But, the prophecy also warns about this knowledge being misused, right? And that makes me think about, like, echo chambers on social media, where people are only seeing information that confirms what they already believe.
Mhm.
And that, like, almost feels like a direct link to that whole secrets being revealed thing.
Yep.
But, not in a good way.
Exactly, yeah. I think the prophecy highlights this kind of double-edged sword of knowledge, It can be really liberating, it can empower people,
For sure.
but in the wrong hands, it can be really dangerous. And yeah, you're right. The way these algorithms work, they can definitely create those echo chambers where misinformation can just spread like crazy.
Yeah, and it almost feels like the prophecy is warning us,
Yeah.
Don't get swept away by the speed and all the information out there. We have to be more careful, you know. Think critically about things. Be aware of how technology could be used to manipulate us.
Absolutely. I think it's really a call for wisdom, for discernment, especially in the digital age.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, stepping back from the internet example, are there other areas of modern life where, like, these biblical prophecies seem to kind of resonate? Because the source also mentioned things like societal values and global conflict.
Oh, definitely. There are prophecies that talk about times of like social upheaval, moral decay, And some people, they look around at the world today, all the polarization, the cultural shifts happening, and they see those prophecies reflected there. And then, of course, you have prophecies about wars, rumors of wars, and some people see those as like foreshadowing the conflicts we see happening today.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to think about, and I know some people are going to be skeptical about connecting these ancient texts to what's going on in the world today.
Right.
But I think even if you don't take them literally, they can still offer some really valuable insight into human nature, like the patterns that repeat throughout history.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether you see these prophecies as like divinely inspired predictions or just profound observations about the human condition, they definitely give us a unique perspective on the challenges we face today.
Well, this deep dive has certainly given us all a lot to consider.
It really has.
And I think as we, try to navigate all the complexities of the 21st century, maybe it is worth taking a moment to reflect on these ancient words of wisdom, and asking ourselves, are we actually living out these prophecies in ways we don't even realize? And if so, what can we learn from them, to create a better future?
Hmm. That's a really good question.
Yeah, something to think about.
Definitely.
Thanks for joining me for this deep dive.
My pleasure. It was a